Why don't we go ahead and start? I'll welcome everyone to the Rhone Rangers virtual experience. We're so glad you guys could join us today. My name is Tony Coyle. I'm the general manager here at Thacher Winery in Paso Robles. I'm also the current president of the Rhone Rangers organization. Today you're joining us for a virtual discussion on Rhone red blends from Paso Robles, from our backyard. I would like to take this moment to introduce our moderator, Cindy Rynning. Cindy has been writing about wine and food and travel on her award-winning wine blog, Grape Experiences, since 2011. She has written for a variety of print and digital publications, Crave Local, Wine Tourist Magazine, Wine Traveler, Wine Enthusiast, Psalm TV, online magazine, just to name a few. She's also the co-creator of the YouTube channel Crush on This. Welcome, Cindy.
Thank you very much. I am really happy to be here.
Thank you.
So
The floor is yours.
Yeah, the floor is mine. This is really exciting. Everyone can just hear me for once. I am excited to be here. I have just moved to Paso Robles and diving right now 2 feet in with you all. So thank you all for asking me to moderate this panel, which is a great panel. I've pre-gamed with some of the wines we're going to be tasting, and they're outstanding. We're going to be talking about Paso Robles red blends. And I'm not sure how many people know this, but I think you probably do if this is the Rhone Rangers event. Paso is known for its Rhone varietals and the cultivation of such, and in a very, very good way. We're doing Syrah, Grenache, we're doing Mourvèdre, Carignan, Counoise, Cinsault, Grenache Blanc, Roussanne, Marsanne, Claret, and Viognier. And everywhere I go, I'm so impressed with the work that's being done with cultivating these varieties and blending them to make the wine even better in the bottle. I was noticing that all the wines we're tasting today, the 4, are from the 2019 vintage. So I wasn't here in 2019, so I was kind of enticed to find out a little bit more. It was definitely a sterling year, with people were saying one of the best vintages on record. I don't know, you all can weigh in on that one. Long, gentle growing season, colder winter and mild spring, no major 100+ degree heat spikes. And I read that the harvest was 2 weeks later than usual. So maybe you all can correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But some of the descriptors are purity, freshness, richness, and even power. So let's figure out if that was accurate. And I have 4 panelists that we're going to share. They're going to share their stories and their wines. And I'm really impressed with each. We have Sherman Thacher from the winemaker and owner of Thacher Winery. Welcome. Cris, winemaker and owner of Via Creek Winery. Phil LaMontagne, winemaker at TH Estates. And Mark Adams, winemaker, owner of Ledge Vineyards. So welcome, and thank you for being here. Let's start with Sherman. Sherman, I was looking a little bit at your bio, and this was interesting. I didn't realize you started as a brewer, and you became an award-winning brewmaster, that you did this for 16 years. So that's kind of an interesting little tidbit. You met your wife at the brewery, so on and so forth. You got married in 1998. And so you continued to brew beer, but you also had a small wine operation for 10 years or more, and it was very award-winning. And then you were inspired to move to Paso Robles. So let's talk about, I guess your winery and tasting room opened in what, 2008? Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Well, you have brought with you the 2019 Serious Play. So tell us a little bit about that wine while I
Sure.
have a taste.
Yeah, we put this together. After making beer for a pretty long time and basically going through the whole spectrum of super hoppy, very alcoholic beers, I've kind of come full circle and gotten back down to just enjoying kind of the lighter, crisper, cleaner ones. And a lot of that's kind of translated into the wines I'm making these days too. I'm enjoying fresher styles and lighter, more elegant wines. So this one was definitely born with that in mind. 3 of the varietals, are larger grapes. They carry less tannin typically, especially in this area, just with the skin to flesh ratio. And so this year we went a little bit Counoise heavy on this one, but we have Counoise, Cinsault, Syrah, and Mourvèdre in here. All of these grapes go in neutral oak. The Cinsault, Counoise, and Mourvèdre are all put into puncheons. So they're larger format. They oxidize at a slower rate. They keep the wine nice and fresh. And then the Syrah we put in smaller 225-liter barriques, this kind of standard barrel size, just so it can oxidize and mature a little bit more quickly at a faster rate than the others. And that way, when we put together, we've got a well-aged Syrah, but these other fresher varietals basically kind of cooped up in a larger format where they're retaining their freshness. So,
well, I know you source grapes from other counties. Are all the 4 grapes in this particular blend from Paso?
They're all from Paso, yes.
Okay.
So the Counoise and the Cinsault both come from Glenrose Vineyard, which is up off of, in between Kyler Canyon and Peachy Canyon Road. And then the Syrah and the Mourvèdre come from, the Syrah comes from our vineyard, and the Mourvèdre comes from Hastings Ranch out on Adelaida Road. So
yeah,
kind of
and I know
bounce around.
There's only 14.1% alcohol in this. So it's on the lower end, actually, of what we have here today.
Yeah, it's it's probably lower than a good portion of wines made here in Paso. As I said, I'm just kind of enjoying the leaner, kind of more elegant fruit flavors that you get from these lighter renditions of these blends. So yeah, we pick everything pretty early, anywhere from 21 to 23 and a half bricks, sometimes a little bit lower, which is kind of unheard of numbers for some. But at that point, we have natural acidity. And basically our program here in the winery is really not making any additions at all. So we'll bring in the fruit, and it's very important that all the chemistry is kind of correct. So when we're done with the finished product, it has, the right acid, the right mouthfeel and whatnot. So we don't add water, we don't add acid, we don't inoculate. Everything's native ferments, everything's native bacteria. We don't use enzymes, we don't use nutrients. We just let everything kind of ferment on its own. So we're not trying to be natural by any means, but it just seems if you pick it at the right acid level when the fruit is kind of reaching its peak where it's about to start falling off pH wise, the wine will kind of come together pretty nicely. So
it really does.
Had a lot of luck with that. So
I love the fresh acidity. It's a beautiful, and you said the word elegant. I totally agree with you. It's very elegant. I feel a big, blackberry compote in this. You've got that rich, dark fruit. And what are some of the other notes I wrote down? It's boiled. Bold. It's not boiled. It's very bold wine, but it does have that elegance and that freshness. So you can really get that flavor.
It's nice and satiating on the palate. Basically the Counoise and the Mourvèdre, the Counoise we destem completely. The Cinsault is done 100% whole cluster. The Mourvèdre is 50% whole cluster. And the Syrah probably had a percentage. I don't actually remember specifically from this blend how much whole cluster is in there, but there's a small percentage of whole cluster in that as well. We like some of the notes you get from the whole cluster. It can also help with pH adjustment. Our new vineyard out on Kyler Canyon has a lot of acid generally. So we've been using a fair amount of whole cluster to kind of temper that a little bit. But it seems to work really well with the Cinsault. It being a lighter, kind of bigger grape that I think it gets a little bit lost if you make it without its stems. So it adds some nice spice, nice pepper, and
definitely the pepper.
just yeah. So
what would you eat with this?
Dinner
tonight.
Yeah, just I think it would go well with something, maybe like a flat iron steak, maybe some grilled mushrooms on the side. I don't know. I just hadn't really thought about it, but I drink it with just about anything, really. But
and I think you could actually drink it on its own. It's very balanced, very integrated with the tannins and the acidity and the alcohol and the fruit. I like it a lot. Very nice. Do you guys have any questions? What else?
I think it would pair nicely with that a big ass trout that you pulled out of one of those rivers lately. Lemon juice and grill marks. That would be fantastic.
Maybe a smoked trout. Yeah.
And I think also, Sherm, you've really kind of been on the forefront of this style here in Paso. Topless was definitely playing a lower alcohol component, but when you started bringing Counoise and Cinsault into the mix, 6-7 years ago, these wines they had a freshness and a lightness that was really something that I think we all gravitated to in our warmer summer months, and they were just like, wow. And you put the idea in my head, like, wow, we can actually do this style of wine. It's not, we live in a region that does more of more really easily.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thanks, Chris. And yeah, just living here in California, we have 10 months of summer. So I think these lighter, more elegant wines kind of lend to that climate that we're in, as far as, drinking anyway. So I love big wines, but typically it's got to be with a big meal, and it's going to be this time of year. Whereas the other 10 months, I'm kind of looking for something maybe even chilled. Some of our wines do really well with, we do a straight Cinsault, and that with a little slight chill on it is pretty nice. So
you
chillable
read
reds.
my mind. You read my mind. I was just getting ready to ask you what you thought about just chilling, putting it in the fridge for like 20 minutes, giving a little chill.
I think that's great. And especially, again, on a smoking hot day, if you're cracking something in the afternoon and you're outside just enjoying the weather, a slight chill is going to go a long way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If anyone has any questions, they can certainly put them in the chat, and we can answer them when we can. So our next, Sherman, are you done? Should we go on to Chris?
Sure. Yeah. We can circle back at the end, make sure everyone has a chance to. Yeah.
That sounds great. Let's see. Chris, did a little research about you too. So your West Paso estate, organic and biodynamic. And you moved, this is interesting, I didn't know, you moved to Paso in 1996 to open a restaurant, right? And
Correct.
You started to produce your own wines for the restaurant. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
And eventually in 2003, you purchased the 60-acre property in the Peachy Canyon area and built the winery. And you started planting the Rhone varieties in around 2012. And your property is called the MAHA estate. So most of your plantings are Grenache and Syrah, but you also source from other vineyards. So could you tell us a little bit about your winery and then also what we're drinking in the glass?
Of course. So everything that you said was correct. I'm glad that you didn't go to the post office to get that bit of information. But really, we came to wine, my wife Joanne and I, with we came to Paso to open the restaurant, and then met all kinds of great folks that opened a door to grape growing and winemaking that we didn't think was really accessible. So with my knowledge of buying wine and selling wine at the restaurant, meeting folks like Justin Smith and Matt Trevison and Neil Collins and a plethora of other folks that came along through that. You know, when we moved to Paso, the Rhone varieties really had not started to take hold. It was, most of the press was being written on Zinfandel, whether that was coming from Peachy Canyon or from Ridge. But then with the inception of Hospice de Rhone, that really turned a corner. Tablas Creek started to become more recognized as a Rhone producer, and with their roots deeply entrenched in Chateauneuf, that really started things. That's what got me drinking the Rhone varieties, and it really started in Australia, and then I moved to Spain and then into France. So after a number of years, we felt that, you know, the climate was conducive to these varieties, and we started off the first year in 2001. I went to Justin Smith, who owns James Berry Vineyard and makes Saxon wines, and I said, hey, do you have any fruit available? And he said that he didn't, but he gave me a couple names. One was Neil Collins, who helped me find some fruit, and then which some of Grenache and Mourvèdre from the first vintage came from Glen Rose, where Sherman's getting some fruit from. And then the next year we got some James Berry fruit and some Denner fruit. It really went all in on Grenache. So we had the opportunity to purchase this property out on Peachy Canyon Road. And one of the great things prior to that is Justin and I would ride this corridor on our bikes, and he'd look up on the hillside that was all walnuts and go, that would be such a badass planting someday. And it just happened to fall into our lap, and now it is a badass planting. So we call it the MAHA estate because the folks that used to live here, their name was MAHA. And there was a water tank that just said a stenciled MAHA. We liked how it sounded. It was easy to say. It looked good. And then after doing some more digging on the Google, in Sanskrit, it means great or a higher place. So that really was kind of the nail in the coffin, if you will, as far as a brand name. And it can be such a challenge to find a name in this world of wine these days. Yeah. So what is in your glass is a 2019 Understory. It's a Grenache-based blend. It is 46 Grenache, 31 Mourvèdre, 23 Carignan. It's one of the 2 red wines that we make off this property. It's conceptually, we make the wines in a yin and a yang, a fruit and a savory, a masculine and a feminine, a light and a dark. Can't have one without the other, but half the property is planted in Grenache, so one will always be Grenache based. We love Grenache for its acidity, its energy, its tension, and then we fill out the middle and the base with some Carignan and Mourvèdre. It's about 10% whole cluster across the board, maybe 15% new wood. And this is, of our red wines, this is our first Demeter labeled and CCOF labeled wine. That's a big thing for us. We feel that those farming practices give the truest expression of the site. And, you know, we want to make sure that when we're long gone, that this site will provide a living, food, whatever it may be, to those beyond us. So we just are super excited to have received our ROC certification, regenerative organic, which Tony was, Craig was on the forefront of, along with Tablas Creek. And I think that's it's the way to play for us. But Grenache, Mourvèdre, Carignan, it's got nice snap, good. It's got some savory notes to it. This wine was bottled about a year ago, a little over a year and a half ago, and is coming along nicely. I think it'll age quite well. One other thing to mention, within everything that we're tasting, we're in about a 3.5 mile radius, which is really cool because there's a diverse style of wines here. I think when we jump into the ledge wines, you're going to see what grapes can do on a sandstone base, whortled clay over limestone, which a lot of this area is. So I think it's a great example of what West Paso can do, and a nice range of styles.
Yeah, when my first sniff of this wine earlier today, when I did my pre-gaming, the floral notes were amazing. Loved it. It was just they just wafted out of the glass. It was just so beautiful. But I found a little orange peel in this too. I just couldn't get away from some orange on the nose and the palate too, and the earth and white pepper and anise. It's just a lovely wine. It's just
Thank you. I think
delicious.
that orange peel is such a Grenache thing. You know, and it depends if you hit that sweet spot, you get that orange peel. If you go on the riper side, you get more into the darker blue fruits, and then if you go with a bunch of whole cluster, you get that interesting savory component, a little bit more of that cigar box. But I would agree with you, that wine does show some of that orange peel, that anise. It's pretty nervy still, so I think it's still in its teenage phase.
Right. Yeah.
Hey guys, can we take a peek at the map again? Because and for those that are playing at home, I think it'd be helpful again to see Chris's map, and if we can sort of get an idea of where we're at here. Because even though it's we're all relatively close, it's pretty cool to see that.
Craig.
That was actually somebody texted me about it. So I'm forwarding the request on to y'all.
So Chris, did you hear that question? Can you speak a little about regenerative agriculture?
Sure. So from day one, we started farming organically, coming from the food business. It's always been a big part of our lifestyle. As regenerative started to come into play, it's a much larger concept that started with global textiles. Some of the founders, Patagonia, I think Paul Dolan's in there, and we liked the concept. It's really about maintaining soil health, building soil nutrient. Much of that is coming through no-till, along with cover crop. No use of petrochemical fertilizers and whatnot. It's all being based on plants, various compost teas and whatnot. But we really we like what it's doing plus there's also a social element to it. And, we were filling out the application, and the farming side was easy, but then we get into the social component, and that was like, they're asking questions that, we're a very large team of like 5. So it's like, are your people paid well? They could always be paid more. But it's some of the questions were, do you have child labor? I'm like, well, we've got our kids, but they're not children anymore. But it's I think it's in a time where we're kind of straddling the edge of possibly becoming over certified in many realms. I think ROC is really kind of all encompassing for soil integrity, wine integrity, social integrity, and I think it's a great organization. We're proud to be a part of it. You want to, Craig? Can you throw that one back up? Yeah. So I just dropped a few little dots there. That's where everybody is located.
Okay.
So I think from TH to MAHA is 4.6, MAHA to Thacher is 2.5, MAHA to Ledge is 2.8. So if you put it in the middle, we're about 3 and change in a circle. And I think about 12 and a half to 16 miles from the Pacific Ocean.
Right. Very close. All right. So how about, let's move on to, thank you, Chris. Very good. Thank you, Sherman, too. Let's move on to Phil. Phil, my sleuthing uncovered a few things about you. And you took over the winemaking program at Terry Hogue in 2017. And you grew up here in Paso and within this Willow Creek sub-AVA. And not only that, but you're very bright, graduated summa cum laude from the wine and viticultural program at Cal Poly. And then you had a little musician stint. So I'm very, impressed with your bio as well. Also that I loved there was a quote that I found: each harvest is an opportunity to capture a unique and authentic snapshot of a wine from a specific time and a specific place. And I just really love that, because that really does say it all when we're talking about winemaking. So let's talk about your story with the 2019 Cuvée 5 blocks. Could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Established fellows here on the panel, little later to the game, but I started for the Hogues in 2015. As you mentioned, I grew up in the area. I moved to Paso in '92 and lived on Willow Creek Road and kind of rode the school bus around all these places, often before they were vineyards themselves. So, but was in the area, never planned on getting into wine, and kind of slid sideways into it like a lot of other folks, like the Hogues themselves, and landed here by happenstance. I had another internship lined up that fell through, and kind of last minute I got a phone call from someone who said, hey, these guys are looking for somebody, and I said, that's great, I love the wines, let's do it. So 2015 I was interning, and then 2016 was kind of the sous chef for that vintage, and then by 2017 was in charge of the winemaking program here. It's been a blast to work with a single site here and kind of have a project that is focused specifically on the estate, because you really get to know the intricacies, and as the picture that was just up kind of shows. A lot of Paso is made up of these really conical hills, and that gives you a lot of different aspects where the vines are presented to light different points in time of the day, different temperatures. They accumulate different water in the soil based on where they're at. And so it gives you a chance to really get to know and kind of micro farm things as needed in that capacity. So this blend, it comes from across the entire property. The 5 blocks is a dual meaning. Terry played professional football, so in his college career he had 5 field goal blocks. That's the 5 blocks there, and then we also have 5 blocks here on the property. So this comes from each of the 5 blocks and incorporates a little bit of something from everything. And so we have stuff that's eastern facing and steep, and that stays a lot cooler and a lot fresher profile, maintains a little more acidity to it. We have stuff that's kind of on the western facing side. We have new row orientations too, that kind of go along with the sun or across the path that the sun takes. And so those all present little different facets to it. So while it's 75% Syrah, the Syrah actually comes from 3 different blocks on the property for this. We'll do some winemaking stuff a little differently based on where it comes from. Some of the cooler stuff in the back that maintains a little more acidity. We'll pop the tops on barrels and do some whole cluster fermentations inside of that. I like the incorporation of everything during fermentation because it's very chemically active. And I just think you get a much more cohesive and interesting kind of final product when you do it that way. And so we'll do whole cluster fermentations like that, and then everything else is kind of destemmed, and we'll play with, based on the vintage and what we're seeing, a certain amount of kind of full berry versus crushed fruit for the Syrah. Mourvèdre and Grenache we'll do a lot of co-ferments for, because based on where it's out in the property, we have some overlapping on the ripening for those, and they're very good co-fermentation partners. So some of the Mourvèdre and Grenache on this come from some of those co-fermentations.
Yeah, this is a beautiful wine. I mean, I noticed baking spice and cranberries popping out on the nose here. This is what my first impression was. And then a lot of herbs and cloves and a little bit of meat on this wine. A little sweet tobacco leaf on the finish. What am I right, or am I kind of off base. I just think it's a beautiful, beautiful wine.
For sure. I think like the whole cluster fermentations kind of come through and bring some of that herbaceousness and some of the spice to it as well. The barrels that I'm kind of choosing, I'm kind of intentionally picking something that has some of those baking spices and is a little brighter, kind of offset some of the deeper, richer components of the wine, or kind of bring balance to that in my mind. So it's kind of hitting across the board for me. And then, yeah, I think you nailed it with that.
Yeah, good, good. Yeah. How about everybody else? What are you sipping along too? Are we all, you guys in it? Got ready to serve this one too at the Christmas table? All right.
How much of that barrel ferment do you do now?
So I will barrel ferment probably in the ballpark of kind of 6 to 8 tons worth of Syrah that comes in, and I'll divvy it up amongst other stuff. I tend to try to break in the new oak that comes in. I'll try to pop it and ferment in the new oak as it comes in. That's kind of my initial conditioning with it.
And these are larger format that you're doing, 3 to 500 liter or what?
Yeah, I moved more to the 500 liter. The 19 vintage actually was kind of the last one where I had a lot of the 228s. And while it sounds romantic to open up the tops of all those barrels, it's not super romantic to open the tops of those barrels. But you get good at it. Part of the harvest regiment. But some people, and to each his own, some people find that that's not worth doing, popping the tops on the barrels and fermenting in it. I absolutely feel like the wine starts off with a head start and a little more cohesion right out the gate. So,
What's your production of this wine?
for this wine, we are at about 225 cases.
Okay. Not much.
Not a whole lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd also like to know if all of you distribute to, I know obviously California, but to other states. Is it DTC only, or do you have distributors in other states? You could just put that in the chat because people might want to know that. So if they want to pick up a bottle and they don't live in California.
Tony, can you do that for me?
I'm on it.
You're so helpless, Sherm.
I know. We almost didn't get hooked up for this thing. I was frantic.
Oh my gosh. So do you guys have any other questions for Phil before we move on? I know.
So Phil, are you 100% estate, or are you sourcing a little bit?
The 19 we source a little bit because we were in the middle of a replant for the vineyard. It still ends up being kind of predominantly from the vineyard. This is also another reason why the production's lower across the 19 vintage, 20 vintage, and 21. It's also the reason. So that's another point to preface. Like we had replanted the back half of the property first, so everything on the top of the hill and eastern facing. The 19 vintage, we were short a lot of the western facing stuff. So I think that this actually kind of shows a little more of the like cooler aspect from the property here, and a little different. And when we source, we kind of tried to stick right in the ballpark. We got a little bit next door at Kyler there, and then a couple other spots, but really just tried to, again, we're like a state focus, to try to keep it as much state as possible for this.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And by the way, our vineyard is right across the street almost from Phil's, or I don't know, like an eighth of a mile or less from our other estate vineyard that we have. So we're loving the fruits just coming on over there. So it's been really fun working in that area.
It's a really nice block. And to speak to that map too, I wish I could had a picture looking from our property here west. You can see these hills undulating as you go, and every valley that's in between there is its own thing. Very unique. I mean, that's kind of what makes Paso fun as well, because you really do constantly discover little nuanced vineyards and pieces and components based on every one of those valleys that you might find it in.
It is such a diverse region. I mean, you Google Earth is such a great toy to look at and just see, watersheds and vegetation and how things are growing and exposures. And TH Vineyards is what, probably about 1,100 feet elevation.
Close to that, yeah.
And then the highest point on the west side, which is owned by Adelaida, is like 2,380. Top of our place is 1,800. Mark, what are you, about 14 and change?
No, we're 1,250, 1,300, but the vineyard's at 1,250. Yeah.
We're right at 11 basically in both sites here at the winery, with the vineyard we have here, and then our other site over off of Cellars, like 11, maybe 12 at the most.
Nice.
Wow. All right. Are there any more questions before we move on to Mark with Ledge Vineyards? No, we can talk after too. All right. All right, Mark. This was kind of interesting. Before we can just talk about this later. I want you to address this before I forget. You have one of the few sandy soil sites in the county. Is that kind of accurate?
I think so.
Okay. So let's remember that thought, because I want to talk to you about a little bit more about terroir. But you grew up on the ranch that you now farm in West Paso. And I guess your family bought the farm in the 70s, late 70s. And then time went on, you cut your teeth as an assistant winemaker at Saxum. And then how did you come back? I mean, how did you get from there to this point? Why don't you fill in the blanks on that one?
Well, getting to Saxum was a matter of doing something with the ranch and having siblings that were solid in their careers. And I had always wanted to do something like this and work toward it. And there was an opportunity to farm the place, and I jumped on it. That happened to be a time that Saxum needed an assistant. So I was the first guy pulling hoses over there. And that was sort of an easy transition from doing that to farming our place. First block that we planted is actually cloned from the Bone Rock Terraces there at JBV.
Wow.
So it's an Estrella clone that I took about, 6,000 cuttings or so from that vineyard and put them underneath the house until the spring came and stuck them in the ground, which was a good thing about sandy soils, is that there's a little less risk involved with that. So if you could stop there, what you're looking at basically is the left side of the left photo. You're getting into York Mountain territory. So we're one of the last, vineyards behind us. There's a river that actually runs behind the ledge there on the left, and that's Jack Creek. So just southwest of us is Jack Creek Cellars, and then you're into Shadow Canyon and all of the York Mountain wineries up there. And on the right, you're looking southeast, and you're looking toward Jamesbury Vineyard and Denner and Jada on the right there. And that's our Grenache block. And on the left, you're looking at the meter. That's everything. We're pretty much southeast oriented. I should have said before southeast. And we're down there where that red highlight is. It's sort of a little red button just below the thing there. You go down and to the right, you'll just keep going south with your thing. There it is. That's it. And then you're right into York Mountain. And then the Santa Lucias are right behind the ledge property. So we'll get a lot of storms lingering around there. We get a pretty good difference in rainfall from storms just sort of hanging out there. And another cool thing about the elevation there is that relative to the surrounding properties, it's actually a plateau, not a ledge. Behind us, we've got Jack Creek. In front of us, we've got Sheep Camp. And a lot of the moisture and cold air drop down behind and in front of us. So we're very fortunate in that way. We very rarely suffer frost and mildew damage.
Wow, that's amazing. And I know that you, I read an article from quite a long time ago, and you were excited about the block of Roussanne that you were putting in. And here we have a wine, the Syrah blend, with 4% Roussanne. Can you just tell us a little bit about your journey with this wine?
Sure. Well, I learned how to co-ferment Roussanne with Syrah from Saxum. One of the things that I always liked about the Estrella clone Syrah coming out of there, and can't beat them, join them. And so, you know, we went ahead and planted Roussanne in a block that's actually the soil is sandstone, sand, clay, gravel. It's the alluvial nature of the soils varies from block to block. It can be almost silty beach sand to gravel, stony, orangey gravel, iron rich gravel, to deep blue black clay that actually breaks apart, you know, 1 inch to 2 inches in the dead of summer. That right now is filling in. You know, we got 7 inches in that last combination of storms here. And so it starts to come together again. Beneath about 4 feet of topsoil, sandy alluvial soils, there's a pan of pretty hard clay pretty much everywhere on the property. So the water retention's great. We've had really good luck, both own rooting and dry farming. Our well is still the same well that my folks put in the mid 70s. And, you know, it's not incredibly deep compared to the neighboring wells. So we know we've got good retention. We're judicious with water, and we just sort of let it ride.
Well, I love the blend here. You've got 62% Syrah, 34% Grenache, and 4% Roussanne. Can you tell us a little bit about what each variety brings to the table here or in the glass?
Sure. So the Syrah, that's Estrella clone Syrah, cloned from Bone Rock, and that's all of it is. We did put a new block in. That this is the second year that we got it. It's still a Estrella clone, but we put it on certified rootstock. It's in Protocol 2000. You know, while we can own root, we don't want to put all of our eggs in that basket. We have to protect our investment a little bit. The Grenache is Spanish Garnacha, and that's in. It goes from a little bit of a gravelly clay down into sand and into heavier white silty with sandstone underneath. The Roussanne's 100% whole cluster that I tread in a macro. This is a 200 case lot, so it's not a whole lot. Okay. All Roussanne was separated, picked together, treaded, and then thrown into the rest of the ferment. Grenache was picked separately a couple weeks later than the Syrah, so that was its own ferment that was blended later. The Syrah and the Roussanne were co-fermented.
Well, I'm finding some on the nose, definitely black cherries, mint. I'm finding some mint here. Love it. Cranberries, pomegranate, a lot of those beautiful red fruits. And then on the palate, sage. I found a little bit of sage on that. So.
Well, we're loaded with this spot that we planted. We had some cattle grazing on here when I was a kid, some rotating grain crops. But when we cleared it, there was a lot of chaparral and all of the surrounding areas. So, yeah. You're gonna taste what lived there before, and it's all Absolutely. Surrounding us. Behind us, there's a 1,000-acre cattle ranch behind us. The Cherry family, not Cris Cherry, but that hasn't changed, and that's largely California native sages and salvias and coyote bush, all that.
Yeah, every wine tells a story, which is pretty much it. I mean, it's not just about, oh, this is a tasting note or whatever. It's the story of your property and what came before the vineyards. So. And it's true with Phil and Sherman and Cris too. I mean, every wine tells a story. So, so guys, do you have questions for Mark on this wine? It's a beauty. It's definitely worth
Mark, you played that so quietly. You just started dragging hoses over at Saxon, but you know, there are not. You were the first employee, but the story goes deeper. Maybe you let the thousands of listeners know that how you came upon that opportunity.
Well, outside of just growing up with the guy, you know.
There we go.
Is that what you're looking for, Chris?
I like why that's such a huge part of the story and college
It is.
experiences and
Well, it's sort of like growing up in what would become, you know, Paso Robles wine country. You know, as a kid, there was no, I mean, the Duceys were the only, and the Pezzentis were the only real winemaking families that I had any interaction with. I was in Michael Ducey's class, and you know, Janelle was a lot younger than us relatively at that time. And April Pezzenti was, I think the last Pezzenti was at Pezzenti, which is now Turley. And you know, unless I missed it from, there could have been others that were, you know, younger, you know, than me, but that was pretty much the deal. And the Duceys were, you know, it wasn't a winemaking family per se. So when the Smiths came around to actually make a little wine on the side, as well as sell it, and Pebble's relationship with John Albin and whatnot, that was just a romantic thing that was unheard of. We just thought it was a cool family that actually made wine, and they, you know, would ask us over to help prune and stuff. But it's a huge part of the story in that they were our first relationship with actual winemakers that I could see, you know, could become something really special. And as I went off to college and come home for Thanksgiving, I would take home the early incarnations of James Berry Vineyard wines, which would have, like, you know, a C on the cork or a D on the cork, and they were early James Berry Vineyard wines that tasted very similar to what we're getting out of Pebble's cellar and Justin's cellar at Saxon. So that was special, and that the wine experience for me as a child tasted very similar to how it does now. The wines are very similar now as they were in 96 when I was, you know. And then Wild Horse, when Wild Horse put James Berry Vineyard on a label, which is kind of funny, I was able to get it at a grocery store in Los Angeles. I was like, they made the big time, you know. I was so thrilled to see James Berry Vineyard on a commercially produced wine label that I was just over the moon about it. And a couple of years later, and tasting the Linné Coloto wines, and then, you know, Saxon and Linné go their own ways, and that was just a prime opportunity for me to come back and help the family, and for me to also help my old buddy, and the rest is history.
that's what I'm looking for.
Me too, Chris. Thanks for asking that question. That was great. Thank you. I mean, I'm looking through some of these questions. There's one question from a Facebook viewer. All of the blends look absolutely delicious. Rhone blends are my favorite blends. I enjoyed all of them slightly chilled, especially in warmer months. But are there certain varietals that you can recommend chilled, or does it have to do more with style? So jump in, any of you all.
I feel like personally, you know, some of the lighter, more elegant wines probably will do better chilled than the hardier ones. But and that just, maybe that's just typical of what people generally do. And I honestly, a lot of my stuff is cellar temperature anyway. I'm happy to pull it out a little bit chilled out of the wine cellar, and some need to open up, but some don't. And a little bit of, you know, not room temperature is, I think room temperature is maybe a little bit warm for
Right.
a lot of the reds for me anyway. So no matter what style. So I guess it depends how cold your house is, but
House is kind of cold right now, so I think I'm doing pretty good. So it really depends on personal preference, but you would suggest some of the more elegant wines put a little chill on it.
yeah, but not overly chilled, because then
Yeah,
you're
just a little.
masking aromatics and
Exactly.
So
Mhm. Yeah. All right, and then here's another question to all of you. What are the greatest challenges in growing grapes in Paso?
I think for me, I'm just going to jump right in again. The sudden heat spikes, and sometimes you can see them a little ways out, but really, if you're going to try and irrigate, if you have the capability of irrigation in time for it, you really need to get on it, 10 days in advance, like irrigating a couple days before, which isn't something you really want to do anyway, because then you're, overhydrating your grape right when you're about to pick it, maybe, or it's a challenge. In 20 we got up to 117 degrees, and you're just watching fruit shrivel up, and there's really nothing you can do about it
Wow.
sometimes.
No.
So we have some dry farm blocks, so those you either you got to make the call to pull it off, or if it's something a little bit hardier. A lot of plants, if it's a bigger grape like Counoise or Grenache, they can handle some heat, and especially if you haven't dropped a huge amount of fruit, they carry some ballast, so the plant can work with that fruit, pull a little moisture out of those berries, and kind of keep everything from emaciating to a point where it's not going to recover. Whereas if
Cinsault is for us, because the bowling ball berries can handle it.
Yep. Yeah, and if there's like no fruit, if you've gone crazy and you're trying to drop stuff down to 1 ton per acre, the plants are going to suck all that moisture up, and a lot of times you're going to lose the fruit if there's no chance to pull it off in time. So it's it's just a calculated risk that you got to take, and with the style of wine we're making, a little heavier crop is actually a nice thing, and it helps with the elegance, and it also helps with those heat spikes.
Definitely. Phil, do you want to weigh in on that one?
For sure. I often say that we probably have it better than a lot of other places, because we get the stylistic choice of how we want to make the wines, kind of what Sherman's talking about. So we have windows that we can be picking in and we can be operating in. So like we do have difficulties like the heat that comes through. Really, if I've learned anything, it's just kind of like to take whatever knee-jerk reaction and set it aside and sit on that for a second, and just really not make any immediate decisions. Kind of I found that if I've reacted more quickly to stuff, I probably regret reacting quickly to get something off, or to pick something if I'm worried about weather coming through or anything like that, versus kind of waiting things out. Heat really is kind of the one thing that comes through. We get some rain and things like that some years, but it tends to be pretty dry and warm after that. So we've been pretty fortunate. And then we have a long growing season in Paso, so sometimes with the late ripening varieties like Mourvèdre, you can butt up against some freezes and things like that. So you kind of watch out for that as well.
Right. Chris, do you have anything more?
I think I think the heat spikes are the challenges. We really work on trying to not irrigate, and I think dry farm sites, specifically Grenache, it's crazy. You get these hot days out here on the west side, and you drive past these dry farm sites of Grenache, and they're just standing strong. Syrah, on the other hand, doesn't quite handle it quite so well.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at the origin, all grapes came from Persia, but you look at where Syrah does, Syrah does great in a warmer climate, but I wouldn't call it ideally for a warm climate grape. Where
Mm-hmm.
Grenache is just such a beast in this.
Totally.
It doesn't have a lot of color. It bleaches by the sun, but it really does well with heat. And kind of circling back around to the regenerative component and no-till, we've found that utilizing no-till and working with a fair amount of cover crop our moisture retention within the soil is higher than cultivated sites, and I think that can always be helpful. I think Phil's comment earlier, which is a great one, patience always prevails in this game. And I came up with a saying quite some time ago, is that I'd rather have 70% of 100% than 100% of 70%. Because, sometimes it's like, it's funny, it's kind of a there's a lot of chicken littles during harvest. It's never going to get ripe. It's never going to get ripe. And then it's like, oh shit, pick it. And really, harvest is it is what it is. And I think farming really dictates what will create some of the best wines. This was a challenging year for all of us. I was talking to Anthony Yunt, who has Royal Nonsuch out on York Mountain. He was working with the Syrah site, and one day it was great, and they decided to let it go 2 more days, and 2 days later, it was gone.
Oh.
Crazy.
It just evaporated like raisins. That's just rolling the dice. Mother Nature is a fickle partner.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, another issue with farming, it's not really farming, but it's, just soil types is, we've got 2 completely different locations in our Kyler Canyon, Willow Creek vineyard. We've got more acid than I've ever experienced before, so we're bringing stuff in, and boy, it's pretty zippy. So, but you can temper that with whole cluster, or find another site that where the pH is different and blend things down a little bit. But boy, I do like acid in my wine, and that site's really been kind of a bonus. But at some points, I feel like it's a little bit over the top. So
I hear you. We're planting Syrah and Mourvèdre here because the Grenache is just like what I would give for some high 3 pH fruit.
Yeah. But it's good, heat and food both are things that enjoy acid. So, and that's something that I have plenty of food. You can't see my belly, but we live here in California again, and I think higher acid wines do really well in this environment.
Very good. Thank you all for these insights. If there are no more questions in the chat, let's see over here in the Q&A. A lot of good comments. I love the story of Mark and Justin as high school friends. This is from Stephen Hewitt, guys. They used to communicate across Vineyard Drive and Willow Creek by blowing their bugles.
Type thief.
Steve and Martha Hewitt are such Paso advocates. They've been playing in this area for probably almost 20 years.
I love it.
They're out at least once a year, usually twice a year. Always a wonderful visit here at the MAHA Hewitts.
Well, they were here just 10 minutes ago.
I don't know if Tim Scott's still here, but I think I owe him an apology on behalf of our shipping company, because and Tim, if you were able to get that wine, let me know. We did our damnedest. We sent it overnight, but I don't know if it made it. But I see he's in the attendee group, so
Okay, good.
it'll get there.
All right, good. Well, if there are no more questions, let's get Tony back on here to wrap things up. I love the story of Mark and Justin as high school friends. Oh, this is from Stephen Hewitt, guys. They used to communicate across Vineyard Drive. And who's talking?
Weird.
We got a loop.
Somebody's got a loop going on.
Help, help. I'm talking from above. Who's talking?
Weird.
We got a loop. We all start talking and it's gonna loop.
That's
We
me.
get a rhythm going.
I'm talking from
Boop, boop, boop. We all start talking and it's gonna loop.
Yeah, there to go. All right, let's end it up. Thank you all. We appreciate it. What a great discussion. And for everyone that viewed, keep an eye out for next year's virtual discussions calendar. We'll be back. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Super fun. Great wines, guys.
Really was. Thank you so
Happy
much.
holidays.
Happy
Take
holidays.
care, Cindy.
That's right, Craig. Take care.
Bye-bye.